I stood at that bank counter and couldn't remember my own name. Not for 10 seconds. Not for 20. For a full 30 seconds, the name I'd carried for 68 years just vanished. And in that half-minute of silence, while the teller waited with her pen hovering over the withdrawal slip, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child lost in a department store. Pure, primal terror. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that morning, because you need to understand who I was before that moment at the bank. Who I thought I was anyway. My name is Margaret Chen, and for most of my life, my mind has been my superpower. I was the woman who could recite Wordsworth from memory at dinner parties. The professor who never needed notes for lectures. The grandmother who remembered every birthday, every allergy, and every little preference of every person I loved. My daughter used to joke that I was her personal Google before Google existed. I wore that badge with pride. 3 years after my husband Thomas died, I'd built a life that worked. A good life. Structured. Predictable. Safe. Every Monday, I did the crossword at Nina's cafe, always finished it before my second cup of coffee went cold. Tuesdays were for volunteering at the library, helping confused patrons navigate the digital catalog with patience they didn't always deserve. On Wednesdays, my book club met, and I was always the one who caught the literary references everyone else missed. Thursdays, grocery shopping, list memorized, never written down. On Fridays, I treated myself to a movie matinee. Weekends belonged to my daughter Sarah and her family. My anchors, my joy, my reason for maintaining this carefully constructed existence. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I was fine. The morning it happened started like any other Thursday. I remember standing in my kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window above the sink, mentally running through my day. Bank first, then groceries, then home to prep for Sunday dinner. I grabbed my purse, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. Hair neat, lipstick applied, the same face I'd seen for nearly 7 decades staring back, and headed out. The drive to First National Bank took 12 minutes. I'd been banking there for 34 years. I knew every teller by name. I parked in my usual spot, 3 spaces from the entrance, because I liked the walk. Inside, the air conditioning hit me like a wave, and I joined the short queue, watching people tap on their phones, lost in their own worlds. When my turn came, I approached Jennifer's window. A sweet girl, probably in her 30s, always asked about my grandson Jake. "Mrs. Chen, how are you today?" she said, her smile warm and genuine. "Wonderful, thank you. I need to withdraw $500, please." "Of course." She pulled up my account, then slid the withdrawal slip toward me. "Just need you to confirm your full name and account number for me." Standard procedure. I'd done this 100 times. I reached for the pen. And that's when it happened. My mouth opened. The words should have come automatically. They'd been automatic my entire adult life. Margaret Elizabeth Chen. 6 syllables. 21 letters. The simplest fact about myself. But my mind went blank. Not fuzzy. Not confused. Blank. It was like someone had taken an eraser to a chalkboard and wiped away the most fundamental piece of information I possessed. I stood there, pen in hand, staring at that slip of paper. Jennifer waited. The silence stretched. I could feel the other customers behind me, their presence pressing against my back like a physical weight. My heart started hammering. My palms went damp. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, the air too cold, and everything too much and not enough all at once. "Mrs. Chen?" Jennifer's voice, gentle now, concerned. "Are you all right?" And just like that, it came back. Margaret Elizabeth Chen. The words flooded back into my consciousness like they'd never left, and I almost sobbed with relief. "Yes, sorry," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded foreign to my own ears. Senior moment. Where was I? I filled out the slip with a hand that trembled just slightly. Jennifer processed the transaction without further comment, but I caught the flicker of something in her eyes. Worry? Pity? I couldn't bear to identify it. I took my money, thanked her with a brightness that felt like a performance, and walked out of that bank on legs that didn't quite feel like my own. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard. 30 seconds. That's all it was. 30 seconds of blankness. Stress, I told myself. Everyone forgets things. I'd been up late reading. I hadn't slept well. It was nothing. Nothing at all. But even as I rationalized, even as I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, something had shifted. A crack had appeared in the foundation of my carefully constructed world, and I couldn't unsee it. The thing about cracks is that once you notice the first one, you start seeing them everywhere. That evening, I was preparing dinner, my famous lemon chicken, a recipe I'd made so many times I could do it in my sleep. I opened the refrigerator to grab the chicken, and for a moment, I couldn't remember what I was looking for. I stood there in the cold light, scanning the shelves, my mind grasping at something just out of reach. 5 seconds this time. Maybe 6. Then it clicked back. The chicken. Of course. I shook my head, annoyed with myself, and continued cooking. The next morning, Friday, I decided to skip the movie. I told myself I wasn't avoiding anything. I was just tired. Instead, I stayed home and did something I never did. I started writing things down. Little notes to myself. Keys go on the hook by the door. Take medication with breakfast. Wednesday book club, 7 p.m. Nothing major. Just reminders. Sunday dinner at Sarah's house almost went perfectly. Almost. I was setting the table with my grandson Jake, age 8 and full of stories about his soccer game, when he asked me if I remembered the name of his best friend. You know, Grandma, the one I told you about last week? The one who scored the winning goal? I couldn't remember. Not the friend. Not the conversation. Not any of it. I watched Jake's face fall, just slightly, and I felt something inside me crumble. So I did what I was starting to realize I was becoming good at. I lied. Oh, of course, sweetheart. How is he doing? Jake brightened and continued talking, and I smiled and nodded, but inside I was screaming. This is my grandson. I remember everything about him. Every single thing. Don't I? That night, alone in my house, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in my hands. The silence pressed in from all sides. I thought about Thomas, and wondered what he would say if he were here. He'd always been the practical one, the one who faced problems head-on while I overthought them. Maggie, he'd say, using the nickname no one else was allowed to use. Stop borrowing trouble. If something's wrong, find out. If nothing's wrong, stop worrying. But Thomas wasn't here, and I was terrified of finding out. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of sticky notes, multiplying across my house like a paper infection. 2 weeks of declining invitations with vague excuses. 2 weeks of living in a state of hypervigilance, constantly checking myself, testing myself, and making sure I still knew who I was. Then came the grocery store incident. It was a Thursday again, my grocery day. I'd been shopping at Morrison's for 15 years. I could walk the aisles blindfolded. I parked, grabbed a cart, and went inside. I made it through produce, through dairy, and through the pasta aisle. I was reaching for my favorite marinara sauce when I looked up and realized I had no idea where I was. Not which aisle. Which store? Which town? For a terrifying handful of seconds, I couldn't place myself in space and time. The fluorescent lights above me could have been anywhere. The stranger pushing a cart past me could have been in any city. I was unmoored, floating, lost. I grabbed the shelf to steady myself. Breathed. Looked around deliberately, anchoring myself with details. Morrison's. The Morrison's on Elm Street. The one with the bakery in the back corner. Thursday. Afternoon. My grocery day. It came back. All of it. But the panic didn't leave. I abandoned my half-full cart in the aisle and walked out. In my car, I locked the doors and let myself cry for the first time since Thomas's funeral. Not delicate tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. Because I knew. God help me. I knew something was very, very wrong. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. I opened my laptop and searched. Forgetting your own name. The results terrified me. Early onset dementia. Alzheimer's disease. Cognitive decline. Words I'd read in books and discussed in abstract terms at my book club but never, ever applied to myself. I closed the laptop. Opened it again. Searched for doctors specializing in memory. Found Dr. Patricia Walsh, neurologist, with an office 20 minutes away. My hand hovered over the phone. What would happen if I called? What would happen if I didn't? I thought about Sarah. About Jake. About my life, my independence, and my identity. Everything. I was hung on the knife's edge of this decision. At 2 a.m, I picked up the phone and made an appointment for the following week. Then I sat in my dark kitchen and wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or if the biggest mistake was waiting this long. The week crawled by. I went through the motions. Crossword on Monday. Took me twice as long as usual. Skipped the library on Tuesday. Told them I had a cold. Attended book club on Wednesday and barely spoke, letting the others carry the conversation while I clutched my coffee cup like a lifeline. When someone asked my opinion on the protagonist's motivation, I gave a vague answer I'd heard someone else say earlier. No one seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, and they were all just too polite to say anything. Thursday arrived. Dr. Walsh's office was in a modern building with too much glass and chrome. I sat in the waiting room, hands folded in my lap, watching other patients come and go. An older man with a walker. A middle-aged woman supporting her elderly mother. I wondered what their stories were. If they felt as terrified as I did. Margaret Chen? I followed the nurse back. Vitals were taken. Questions were asked. Then Dr. Walsh entered. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficiency that felt reassuring rather than cold. Mrs. Chen, tell me what brings you in today. So I did. I told her about the bank. The grocery store. The forgotten conversations. The sticky notes. The terror. All of it came spilling out in a rush, and when I finished, I felt emptied and raw. She didn't dismiss me. Didn't tell me I was overreacting. She just nodded and said, "Let's run some tests." The next 2 hours were a blur of cognitive assessments. Remember these words. Draw this clock. Count backward by sevens. What day is it? What year? Who is the president? Some questions I answered easily. Some made me hesitate. Some, terrifyingly, stumped me completely. When it was over, Dr. Walsh sat across from me, her expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Chen, based on today's assessment and what you've described, I believe we're looking at early-stage dementia, possibly Alzheimer's disease. I want to run additional tests to confirm and determine the progression, but I think it's important you understand what we're dealing with. The words landed like stones in still water. I watched the ripples spread out, knowing nothing would ever be the same. How long? I asked. That's difficult to say. Every case is different. But caught this early, there are treatments that can slow progression and lifestyle changes that can help. You're not alone in this. I nodded. Took the pamphlets she offered. Made a follow-up appointment. Walked out of that office and into the bright afternoon sunshine that felt like mockery. In my car, I sat with those pamphlets in my lap, staring at the titles. Living with Alzheimer's, Resources for Memory Loss. And When to Tell Your Family. That last one made me laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. Tell my family? Tell Sarah that her mother, the woman she'd always relied on to remember everything, couldn't even remember her own name? Tell Jake that his grandmother might one day not remember him? No. I decided right then, sitting in that parking lot with the sun beating down through the windshield. I wouldn't tell them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I would handle this myself. I would fight this thing on my own terms, maintain my dignity, and protect them from the pain of watching me disappear. I drove home, walked into my house, and looked at all those sticky notes plastered across every surface. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat down at my kitchen table, and made a decision. I would hide it. I would compensate. I would do whatever it took to appear normal, to be the Margaret Chen everyone knew and depended on. I would not become a burden. I would not become an object of pity. I would fight this battle alone. But here's the question I couldn't answer then, the one that haunted me as I sat there sipping my tea while the sun set outside my window. In trying to protect everyone I loved from my truth, was I really protecting them at all? Or was I just protecting myself from having to face what I'd become? A woman slowly losing the very thing that made her feel human. The sticky notes became my lifeline, and my shame multiplied across every surface of my home like a desperate woman's prayer. Turn off the stove after cooking. Wednesday 7 p.m. Book Club. Sarah's phone number, 5550147. You live at 428 Maple Drive. That last one, the one reminding me of my own address. That's when I knew I'd crossed into territory I couldn't come back from. But I kept telling myself I was managing. I was coping. I was still Margaret Chen, still in control. I wasn't. The first week after my diagnosis, I threw myself into what I can only describe as a campaign of deception. I studied those pamphlets Dr. Walsh gave me like they were enemy battle plans, learning not how to live with dementia, but how to hide it. I discovered that if I repeated things silently to myself 3 times, I could hold on to them longer. I started recording conversations on my phone, pretending I was checking messages when really I was preserving interactions I knew I'd forget by dinner. I began arriving everywhere 15 minutes early so I could orient myself and remind myself where I was and why I was there before anyone else showed up. It was exhausting. It was lonely. But it was working. Or so I thought. The book club meeting that Wednesday should have been my triumph. I'd reread the novel twice, taken extensive notes, and rehearsed my talking points in the mirror like an actress preparing for opening night. The book was The Remains of the Day, by Kazuo Ishiguro, a story about a butler who'd spent his life in repression and regret. Looking back now, the irony isn't lost on me. I arrived at Patricia's house early, notes folded in my purse, confidence plastered across my face like makeup. The other women trickled in, Patricia, our host, with her perfectly arranged cheese board, Linda, who always dominated the conversation, Susan, the quiet one who noticed everything, and Beth, whose laugh could fill a room. My friends. Women I'd known for over a decade. We settled into Patricia's living room with our wine and our opinions, and for the first 20 minutes, I felt like my old self. I made a comment about Ishiguro's use of unreliable narration. Linda agreed enthusiastically. I allowed myself to relax. That was my mistake. Margaret, what did you think about the butler's relationship with Miss Kenton? Patricia asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. You always have such insight into the romantic subplots. I opened my mouth to respond. I'd prepared for this exact question. I had notes about duty versus desire, about emotional repression, and about the tragedy of missed opportunities. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue. But they weren't in my mind. I stared at Patricia, my brain scrambling desperately. Who was Miss Kenton? I'd just read about her. Yesterday. The day before? The woman in the book. The housekeeper. The one who, what did she do? Why couldn't I remember? I've read this book twice in the past 2 weeks. The silence stretched. 4 pairs of eyes watched me. I could feel sweat gathering at my hairline. I started, grasping at anything. I think the relationship was complex. Complex. The most generic literary analysis word in existence. Linda's eyebrows rose slightly. Susan tilted her head. They knew. They knew something was wrong. Well, yes, Linda said slowly, exchanging a glance with Patricia. But what specifically did you think about the ending? When she tells him about her marriage? Marriage? Which marriage? I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. My hands, wrapped around my wine glass, had started to tremble. You know what? I said, setting down my glass with a hand that shook visibly. I'm not feeling well. I think I need to head home. The concerned murmurs started immediately. Are you okay? Do you need a ride? Should we call Sarah? Each question felt like a probe, like they were trying to excavate the truth I was desperately trying to bury. Just tired, I said, gathering my purse, my notes spilling out onto Patricia's Persian rug. I scrambled to collect them, and that's when Susan bent down to help me. Her hand touched one of my note cards, and I saw her eyes scan the words I'd written there. Butler's name, Stevens. Housekeeper, Miss Kenton. Main theme, dignity through service. Ending, regret. She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw pity. Pure, undiluted pity. I snatched the card from her hand, mumbled something incoherent, and fled. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, my breath coming in short gasps. The note cards were scattered across the passenger seat, evidence of my deterioration laid out in my own handwriting. I'd failed. My first real test, and I'd failed spectacularly. But I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. I had to keep going. I had to keep trying. The next morning, Sarah called. Mom, Patricia called me. She's worried about you. My stomach dropped. I'm fine. I just wasn't feeling well last night. She said you seemed confused. Disoriented. She mentioned you had no cards about the book, like you were studying for an exam. I like to be prepared. Since when is that a crime? Mom. Sarah's voice carried that particular tone, the one that meant she was moving from concern to confrontation. What's going on with you? And don't say anything. You forgot Jake's play last month. You've been canceling plans. You're not yourself. Every fiber of my being wanted to tell her. To sob into the phone and confess everything and let her carry this burden with me. But I couldn't. Because if I told Sarah, it would become real. If I told Sarah, I would become a problem to be managed, a mother to be monitored, and a woman to be pitied. I've been distracted, I said. I've had a lot on my mind. I'm sorry if I worried you, but I'm fine. I promise. The lie tasted like ash. Okay, Sarah said, but she didn't sound convinced. But Mom, if something's wrong. Nothing's wrong, I interrupted. I'll see you Sunday for dinner. Tell Jake I love him. I hung up before she could press further, and then I sat in my kitchen surrounded by my sticky notes, and wondered how long I could keep this up. How long before the walls I was building crumbled completely. The answer came faster than I expected. It was a Tuesday, my library volunteer day. I'd been helping at the Lincoln Street Library for 8 years, and I knew that building like I knew my own home. I could shelve books in my sleep, navigate the Dewey Decimal System with my eyes closed, and help patrons find anything from tax forms to trashy romance novels without breaking a sweat. That Tuesday, I walked into the library, waved at Marcus at the front desk, and headed toward the back room to put away my things. Except when I got to the back hallway, I stopped. The door to the break room, the door I'd walked through hundreds of times, looked unfamiliar. Was it the first door or the second? Did it have a window, or was that the supply closet? I stood there, staring at 3 identical doors, panic rising in my throat. This was my library. My place. I knew this building. Mrs. Chen? Marcus appeared beside me, his young face creased with concern. Are you okay? You've been standing here for a few minutes. A few minutes? It had felt like seconds. Or hours. I'd lost time again. I'm fine, I said automatically. Just thinking about what needs to be done today. He nodded but didn't leave, and I realized he was waiting for me to move. To do something. To prove I knew where I was going. So I chose the middle door, praying I was right, and walked through it. It was the supply closet. Marcus gently redirected me to the correct door, and I saw it then, written across his face. That same look Susan had given me at book club. That look that said, "Something is very wrong with Margaret Chen." I made it through my shift by following Marcus's lead, letting him guide me without seeming to guide me, and when it was over, I told him I wouldn't be coming back next week. Family obligations, I said. He nodded, but we both knew I was lying. That night, I added a new sticky note to my collection. Librarian no more. Because if I couldn't navigate a building I'd known for 8 years, what could I trust myself to do? But here's what I should have been asking. If I kept cutting pieces out of my life every time I stumbled, how much of my life would I have left? And would I even recognize what remained? The thing about living a double life is that it requires constant vigilance. Every conversation becomes a performance. Every interaction a test. You're always on stage, always monitoring yourself, always terrified that the mask will slip and everyone will see the truth underneath. I started declining Sunday dinners. Just occasionally at first, a headache here, fatigue there. Sarah protested, but I held firm. It was easier than sitting at her table, surrounded by family, trying to remember which grandchild was allergic to dairy and which one hated broccoli. Easier than risking another moment like the one at the park with Jake, when his best friend's name had simply evaporated from my memory. But avoiding Sarah meant I couldn't see my grandson, and that hurt more than I'd expected. Jake would call sometimes, his 8-year-old voice full of stories about school and soccer, and the new video game he was playing, and I'd struggle to follow the thread of his narrative, to remember who was who in his social world. I started keeping notes about our phone calls, documenting names and details I should have remembered naturally. Jake's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. Best friend, Tommy. Soccer team, the Blue Lightning. I was creating a database of my own life, an external hard drive for a brain that was slowly failing. Then there was Robert. Robert Martinez had moved in next door about a month before my diagnosis. A widower, 72 years old, with silver hair and kind eyes and an openness about his own struggles that I found deeply unsettling. He was everything I was trying not to be, vulnerable, honest, and willing to admit weakness. He'd been trying to befriend me since he arrived, showing up with homemade tamales, inviting me for coffee, and asking if I needed help with yard work. I'd rebuffed every overture politely but firmly. I didn't need help. I didn't need friends who would see too much. But Robert was persistent. One Saturday morning, about 3 weeks after the library incident, I was in my garden trying to remember what I'd planted where. I knew I'd put in tomatoes and herbs, but which was which? The small green shoots all looked identical to me, and I'd forgotten to label them. Basil, oregano, thyme, and sage. Robert's voice came from over the fence. In that order, left to right. I watched you plant them in April. I looked up, surprised. You remember what I planted? He smiled. I pay attention. Plus, I have the same herbs in my garden. Muscle memory from my restaurant days. You owned a restaurant? For 30 years. Los Hermanos in downtown. We closed 5 years ago. He leaned against the fence, and I noticed the way his hands gripped it, the swollen knuckles, the slight tremor. Arthritis, he said, catching me looking. Ended my cooking career. Can't hold a knife steady anymore. His honesty felt like an invitation I didn't want to accept. But something made me ask. How did you cope? When did you realize you couldn't do what you'd always done? Badly at first, he admitted. I thought I was my work. When I couldn't cook anymore, I didn't know who I was. It felt like losing my identity. He paused, looking at me with those kind eyes. But eventually I learned that I'm not what I do. I'm who I am. Does that make sense? It made too much sense. It cut too close to the bone. I mumbled something about needing to get back inside and fled from the conversation, from his wisdom, and from the mirror he was holding up to my own situation. But his words haunted me. I thought I was my work. I thought I was my mind. If I wasn't sharp, capable Margaret Chen, who was I? The days blurred together in a haze of anxiety and exhaustion. I was sleeping poorly, waking at 3 in the morning to quiz myself on basic facts. My name. My daughter's name. My address. My birthday. Some nights I'd get them all right. Some nights I'd stumble, and the fear would keep me awake until dawn. I stopped going to the cafe for crosswords. Stopped attending book club entirely. Sent an email saying I needed to take a break for personal reasons. Stopped answering calls unless I'd prepared for them, reviewing my notes about the person before picking up. My world contracted to the size of my house, and even there, I was getting lost. Then came the day with Jake that changed everything. Sarah had begged me to babysit. She had a work emergency. Her regular sitter was sick, and she was desperate. "Please, Mom. Just for a few hours. You can take him to the park. He'll entertain himself. I really need you. I really need you." Those words were my kryptonite. After weeks of avoiding them, of making excuses, I couldn't say no. So I said yes, even though every instinct screamed danger. Jake arrived that Tuesday afternoon, backpack full of toys, face bright with excitement. "Grandma, can we go to Riverside Park? Tommy's going to be there with his mom." Riverside Park. I knew that park. I'd taken Sarah there when she was Jake's age. I could do this. It would be fine. We drove there, Jake chattering the entire way about school and soccer and something about a science project I couldn't quite follow. At the park, he spotted Tommy immediately, and ran off with barely a backward glance. I settled onto a bench, keeping both boys in my line of sight. The afternoon was perfect. Sunny but not too hot. A light breeze. Children's laughter filling the air. I watched Jake climb the jungle gym, his confidence making my heart swell. He was so like Sarah had been at that age, fearless, joyful, and fully present in each moment. I must have closed my eyes. Just for a moment. Just a brief rest in the warm sunshine. When I opened them, the park looked different. The light had changed. It was later somehow. The shadows were longer. And I couldn't see Jake. I scanned the playground. No Jake. The jungle gym was empty. Panic sparked in my chest. Where was I? Why was I here? The thought came unbidden, terrifying. I was in a park. But which park? Why? I stood up, my heart racing. There were children everywhere, but none of them were familiar. None of them were mine. Were any of them mine? Did I have children? Yes. A daughter. Sarah. Sarah's boy. What was his name? The panic escalated to terror. I was supposed to be watching someone. A child. A boy. Sarah's son. But I couldn't remember his name, couldn't remember what he looked like, and couldn't remember anything except this awful certainty that I'd lost something precious. I spun in a circle, searching, my breath coming in gasps. The other parents were starting to stare. A woman approached me. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" "I'm looking for the name." "What was his name?" "A boy. 8 years old. He was here. He was with me." "What does he look like?" I couldn't answer. The details had vanished. Everything had vanished. I was lost in a park, searching for a child whose face I couldn't picture. "Grandma?" I turned. A boy stood there. 8 years old. Brown hair. Concerned eyes. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Was I? I touched my face. It was wet. And then, like a light switching on, everything came flooding back. Jake. My grandson. We'd come to the park. I'd fallen asleep. I'd lost him. I'd forgotten him. The relief lasted exactly 3 seconds before the horror set in. I had forgotten my own grandson. Not his name, his entire existence. For those few minutes, Jake had simply ceased to exist in my mind, and I'd been searching for someone I couldn't even picture. What if something had happened during those minutes? What if he'd gotten hurt? What if he'd needed me and I hadn't even known who he was? "I'm fine, sweetheart," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "Just being silly. Are you ready to go home?" In the car, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Jake was quiet in the back seat, and I wondered what he was thinking. What he'd seen. A grandmother who'd forgotten him, even for a moment. When we got home, I called Sarah immediately. "Come get him. Please. I'm not feeling well." She arrived within 20 minutes, read the terror on my face, and took Jake without questions, but not without that look. That look that said she knew something was seriously wrong. After they left, I sat on my kitchen floor and finally let myself break. Not gentle crying. Uncontained sobbing. Complete, total breakdown. Because I'd crossed a line I didn't know existed. I'd put my grandson in danger. My need to appear normal, to hide my condition, had created a situation where a child could have been hurt. And still, even in my breakdown, even in my terror, I didn't call Sarah back. I didn't tell her the truth. Because telling the truth meant admitting I was becoming dangerous. Telling the truth meant giving up my independence. Telling the truth meant losing myself completely. So instead, I made a new rule. No more babysitting. No more situations where I was solely responsible for another person. I would protect my family by staying away from them. Can you see the twisted logic? I thought I was protecting them. I was really just protecting myself from having to face what I was becoming. The next day, Sarah called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. On the third call, I answered. Mom, we need to talk. I'm fine, Sarah. Just had a bad day yesterday. A bad day? Her voice rose. Jake told me you were crying in the park. That you seemed confused. That you asked him why he was there, like you didn't know who he was. My blood ran cold. He misunderstood. Don't lie to me. She was shouting now. Something is wrong. Has been wrong for months. And you keep shutting me out, keep making excuses, and I'm done pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, ragged with emotion. I could feel my own heart hammering and feel the weight of all the lies I'd told pressing down on my chest. Mom, she said, her voice breaking. Please. Whatever it is, we can handle it together. But you have to tell me. You have to let me in. And I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to unburden myself, to share this crushing weight, to let my daughter help me. But the words stuck in my throat. Because once I said them out loud, there was no taking them back. Once I told her, everything would change. I need some time, I said. I need to figure some things out. Time for what? I can't explain right now. Can't or won't? Both. Neither. I didn't know anymore. I love you, I said, and hung up before she could respond. The following week was a blur of isolation. I unplugged my landline. I stopped checking my cell phone. I let the doorbell ring unanswered when Sarah inevitably showed up, watching from behind my curtains as she stood on my porch, calling my name, begging me to open the door. I was protecting her, I told myself. Protecting her from the burden of me. But really, I was drowning, and I was too proud to reach for the life preserver she was throwing me. It was Robert who finally breached my fortress of solitude. He didn't ring the doorbell. He simply appeared in my backyard one evening while I was sitting on my patio, staring at nothing. Your daughter has been calling me, he said, settling into the chair beside mine without invitation. She's worried sick. She thinks you might hurt yourself. I'm not suicidal, I said flatly. No. But you're not living either. He leaned back, looking up at the darkening sky. I know what it's like to lose who you are. To feel like everything that made you valuable is slipping away. You don't know anything about me. My wife had Alzheimer's, he said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to look at him, and in the fading light, I could see the pain etched in his face. Maria, he continued, we were married for 47 years. The last 5, I watched her disappear piece by piece. And you want to know the worst part? Not the disease. The disease was cruel, but we could have fought it together. The worst part was that she hid it from me for 2 years. 2 years where we could have prepared, could have made plans, and could have said the things that needed saying. She stole that time from us because she was ashamed. Because she thought she was protecting me. He turned to look at me directly, and I saw tears in his eyes. By the time I figured it out, She was already too far gone for some of the treatments that might have helped. Too far gone for us to have real conversations about what she wanted and how she wanted to be cared for. She died ashamed and alone in her own mind, even though I was right there beside her, loving her exactly as much as I always had. Why are you telling me this? My voice was barely a whisper. Because I see you making the same mistake. You think you're protecting your daughter by hiding. You're not. You're robbing her of the chance to help you. You're robbing yourself of the support you need. And worst of all, you're teaching your grandson that when things get hard, the answer is to hide and lie to the people who love you. His words cut through every defense I'd built, every rationalization I'd constructed. I'm scared, I admitted, the words scraping out of my throat like broken glass. Of course you are. You'd be crazy not to be. But fear isn't a good enough reason to face this alone. We sat in silence as the stars came out, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely isolated. Robert didn't push me to talk. Didn't demand answers or explanations. He just sat there, a fellow traveler who'd walked a similar path, offering nothing but his presence. When he finally left, he paused at my gate. Your daughter loves you. Not because of your memory or your sharp mind. She loves you because you're her mother. Nothing will change that. But every day you hide is a day you're not being her mother. Think about that. I thought about little else that night. I thought about Sarah standing on my porch, begging me to open the door. Thought about Jake in the park, watching his grandmother dissolve into confusion. Thought about Robert's wife, dying with secrets that should have been shared. Thought about Thomas, what he would say if he could see me now. He'd be furious. Thomas, who'd always faced problems head-on, who taught Sarah to be brave even when being brave hurt, he'd be so disappointed in the coward I'd become. But knowing what I should do and having the courage to do it were two different things. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my front door. Aggressive, insistent pounding that wouldn't stop. Mom! I know you're in there. Open this door right now, or I'm calling the police for a wellness check. Sarah. Not asking anymore. Demanding. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror as I walked to the door. I looked terrible. Hollow-eyed. Disheveled. Lost. Was this who I'd become? A woman hiding in her own home, too afraid to face the people who loved her. My hand touched the doorknob. Here's what I realized in that moment. We talk about losing our minds like it's the worst thing that can happen. But I'd discovered something worse. Losing yourself while your mind is still intact enough to know exactly what you're losing. That's true hell. And I'd been living in it for weeks, convinced I was being noble when really I was just being a coward. The question wasn't whether to open the door. The question was whether I had the courage to tell the truth once I did. I turned the knob. Sarah stood there, her face a mixture of anger, fear, and relief. Behind her, I could see her car in the driveway, with Jake in the back seat watching. I need to tell you something, I said before I could lose my nerve. But you might want to come inside. It's not a conversation for the doorstep. She studied my face, then nodded and turned to wave at Jake, giving him a thumbs up. He waved back, and I saw the relief wash over his young face. My grandson, who'd been worried about me, who I had thought I was protecting. Sarah followed me inside, took in the sticky notes covering every surface, and I watched understanding dawn in her eyes. Mom, she breathed. What's going on? And standing there in my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my deterioration, I had to make a choice. Keep lying, keep hiding, keep sinking deeper into isolation. Or do the hardest thing I'd ever done, and trust my daughter with the truth. I took a breath. But before I could speak, before I could form the words that would change everything, my phone rang. Dr. Walsh's office. I'd missed my follow-up appointment. The one where we were supposed to discuss treatment options and next steps. Sarah looked at my phone, saw the doctor's name on the screen, and her face went pale. Mom, she said slowly. Why is a neurologist calling you? And just like that, the choice was made for me. The fortress I'd built was crumbling whether I was ready or not. How many times do we convince ourselves we're in control right up until the moment we lose it completely? How many times do we think we're protecting others when we're really just protecting ourselves from the truth? And here's the question that haunted me then and haunts me still. Was my silence mercy, or was it the cruelest thing I could have done to the people who loved me most? What would you do if the moment you'd been dreading finally arrived, and it didn't feel like disaster, it felt like relief? I stood in my kitchen, sticky notes plastered across every surface like wallpaper made of desperation, while Sarah stared at my ringing phone with Dr. Walsh's name glowing on the screen. The neurologist. The one piece of evidence I couldn't explain away with convenient lies. "Answer it," Sarah said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "Answer it, and then tell me everything." So I did. I answered the phone, confirmed I'd missed my appointment, rescheduled for the following week, and hung up. Then I turned to my daughter, and for the first time in months, I told the complete truth. "I have early-stage dementia. Possibly Alzheimer's. I've known for 6 weeks." The words hung in the air between us, and I watched Sarah's face cycle through shock, hurt, anger, and finally, something I didn't expect, determination. 6 weeks, she repeated slowly. "You've known for 6 weeks, and you didn't tell me. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Her voice rose. "Mom, I've been terrified. Absolutely terrified. You've been pulling away, acting strange, forgetting things, and I thought..." She stopped and swallowed hard. "I thought you were pulling away because of me. Because of something I'd done." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. In all my calculations about protecting her from pain, I'd never considered I might be causing a different kind of pain. The pain of rejection. Of abandonment. Of wondering what she'd done wrong. "Sarah, no. Never. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me." She was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. "I'm your daughter. You're supposed to let me help you. You're supposed to trust me enough to share the hard things, not just the easy ones." I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain my reasoning, but she held up her hand. "I need a minute," she said, and walked to my kitchen window, staring out at the backyard where she'd played as a child. The silence stretched between us, heavy with all the things I should have said weeks ago. When she finally turned back, her face had changed. The anger was still there, but it had transformed into something else. Something that looked like resolve. "Okay," she said. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. No lies. No protecting me. Just the truth." So I did. I told her about forgetting my name at the bank. The grocery store confusion. The library incident. The book club disaster. And then, hardest of all, I told her about the park. About forgetting Jake. About those terrifying minutes when I couldn't remember I even had a grandson. "You forgot him?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "For less than 5 minutes. But yes. He vanished from my mind completely." I watched her process this and saw the fear flash across her face. But she didn't run. She didn't lash out. She took a deep breath and asked, "What did the doctor say? What's the plan?" The plan. I'd been so focused on hiding the diagnosis that I'd barely engaged with what came next. "There are medications that can slow progression. Lifestyle changes. Memory exercises. She wants me to come back to discuss options." "Then that's what we'll do," Sarah said firmly. "We'll go together. We'll hear the options. We'll make decisions together." She emphasized that last word, making it clear this wasn't optional. "And Mom? No more hiding. No more lies. From now on, we face this together." The relief that washed over me was so intense it made my knees weak. I'd spent weeks carrying this burden alone, convinced that sharing it would make me weak. But in that moment, letting Sarah help felt like the strongest thing I'd ever done. "There's one more thing," I said. "You should probably sit down." We sat at my kitchen table, and I showed her the notes. All of them. The reminders about her phone number. The list of Jake's friends and teachers. The detailed descriptions of conversations we'd had, transcribed from phone recordings so I could pretend to remember them later. She read through them silently, and I watched her realize the full extent of what I'd been doing. The elaborate performance I'd been maintaining. "This must have been exhausting," she said finally. "It was. It is. So we stop. We stop pretending. We tell people the truth." The thought terrified me. "Sarah, I don't want to be pitted. I don't want people looking at me like I'm broken. Then we'll tell them together, and we'll make it clear you're not broken. You're dealing with a medical condition. That's all. Just like someone with diabetes or heart disease. Would you hide those? That's different. Why? Because this affects your brain? Because we put some special value on mental capacity over physical health? That's just stigma, Mom. And we don't have to participate in it." She made it sound so simple. So rational. But there was nothing simple about watching yourself disappear piece by piece. Still, looking at my daughter's determined face, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe I didn't have to face this disappearance alone. Maybe asking for help wasn't giving up, it was holding on. "Okay," I said. "We'll tell people. But I need to do it my way. In my time. As long as you actually do it." Sarah agreed. "No more vanishing act. Deal?" "Deal." She stayed for another hour, and we made a plan. We'd go to Dr. Walsh together the following week. We'd tell Sarah's husband, Tom, that evening. We'd talk to Jake together, in an age-appropriate way, about what was happening to Grandma. And Sarah would help me set up some safety measures, a medical alert system, a medication organizer, and calendar reminders on my phone to replace the sticky notes. Before she left, she pulled me into a hug. "I love you, Mom. Not because of your perfect memory or your intelligence. I love you because you're my mom. That hasn't changed, and it never will." I held on to her, tears streaming down my face, and wondered why I'd ever thought hiding was the answer. This vulnerability, this connection, this was what I'd been missing. After Sarah left, I stood in my kitchen and started pulling down sticky notes. Not all of them. I still needed help remembering things. But the ones that were about hiding, about maintaining the facade, those could go. I was folding up a note reminding me to act normal at book club, when there was a knock at my back door. Robert, standing on my patio with 2 cups of coffee. "Saw your daughter leave," he said when I opened the door. "Thought you might need this." He held out one of the cups. I took it gratefully. I told her everything. "How did it go?" "Better than I deserved. She's angry, but she wants to help." "Good." He settled into one of my patio chairs, and I joined him. "That's good, Margaret." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then I asked the question that had been haunting me since he told me about his wife. "Robert, do you regret it? Taking care of Maria through everything? Watching her disappear?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I regret that she felt she had to hide it from me. I regret the time we lost because of her shame. But taking care of her? Being there until the end? No. Never. That was a privilege. Hard? God, yes. Heartbreaking? Absolutely. But I got to love her at her most vulnerable. I got to show her that she was more than her memories. That's not something to regret. What if she didn't know who you were at the end? Some days she didn't," he admitted. "Some days I was a stranger to her. But I knew who she was. And I made sure she felt safe and loved, even when she couldn't remember my name. That mattered." I wiped at my eyes. "I'm terrified of becoming a burden." "Then you're terrified of being human. We all become burdens eventually. That's what community is for. That's what family is for. It's not weakness to need help, it's just being alive." His words settled into my chest, finding space next to Sarah's declaration of partnership. Maybe they were both right. Maybe needing help wasn't the end of my dignity. Maybe trying to do everything alone was what had been robbing me of it. "Thank you," I said, "for sharing your story. For being honest when I couldn't be. That's what neighbors are for." He stood to leave, then paused. "Also, there's a support group. For people in early stages. They meet Thursday nights at the community center. Maria and I went together for a while. It helped. Just knowing we weren't alone." After he left, I pulled out my phone and searched for the support group. Found their information. Stared at it for a long time before saving it to my calendar. Thursday nights. Maybe. Possibly. We'd see. That evening, Sarah called. "I told Tom. He wants you to know you're not going through this alone. And he's already researching home modifications that might help. Better lighting, simplified layouts, that kind of thing. Sarah, I don't need. Mom. We're helping. Get used to it." I laughed, a real laugh, and realized how long it had been since I'd done that. The following week, Sarah drove me to Dr. Walsh's office. We sat side by side in the waiting room, and every time my anxiety started to spike, Sarah would squeeze my hand. Just a small gesture, but it grounded me. Reminded me I wasn't alone. Dr. Walsh was thorough. She explained the medications available, cholinesterase inhibitors that could slow cognitive decline. She talked about clinical trials I might qualify for. She discussed lifestyle interventions, exercise, social engagement, cognitive training, Mediterranean diet. None of it would stop the progression, but all of it might slow it down. "How long do I have?" I asked the question I'd been too afraid to ask at the first appointment. Before I'm not me anymore." Dr. Walsh's expression was kind but honest. "That's impossible to predict. Every case is different. Some people maintain functionality for years. Others decline more rapidly. But Margaret, I want you to understand something important. You'll always be you. Your personality, your essence, those don't disappear just because you forget things. You change, yes, but you're still you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that there was a core of Margaret Chen that would persist even when the details fell away. But it was hard to have faith in permanence when impermanence was all I could see. Still, we left with a plan. Medication to start immediately. Weekly cognitive therapy. Monthly check-ins. And something Dr. Walsh called advanced care planning. Making decisions now about what I wanted for my future care, while I still could. In the car on the way home, Sarah said, "We should tell Jake soon. Before he hears something from someone else." My stomach clenched. What if it scares him? Kids are more resilient than we think. And more perceptive. He already knows something is wrong. It's better if it comes from us. She was right, but that didn't make it easier. We told him that weekend, all three of us sitting in Sarah's living room. Jake was on the couch between us, his 8-year-old face serious, as we explained that Grandma's brain wasn't working quite right anymore. That sometimes she might forget things, even important things. That it wasn't her fault, and it wasn't his fault. That we would all work together to help her. "Like when you remind me to do my homework?" Jake asked. "Exactly like that," Sarah said. Jake thought about this for a moment, then turned to me. "Will you forget my name?" The question broke my heart. "I might, sweetheart. Someday. But even if I forget your name, I'll never forget that I love you." He processed this with the seriousness of childhood, then nodded. "Okay. When you forget, I'll just remind you. That's what families do, right? They help each other remember." Out of the mouths of babes. This 8-year-old had grasped in seconds what had taken me months to accept. We help each other remember. That's what families do. The next challenge was my book club. Sarah offered to come with me, but I told her this was something I needed to do alone. She made me promise to call if I needed her, and I walked up to Patricia's door with my heart in my throat. They were all there, Patricia, Linda, Susan, and Beth. The women who'd seen me stumble, who'd witnessed my confusion, who knew something was wrong even if they didn't know what. I didn't wait for the wine to be poured or the pleasantries to be exchanged. I stood in Patricia's living room and said, "I need to tell you all something." 4 faces turned toward me, concern and curiosity mixed in equal measure. "I have early-stage dementia. That's why I've been acting strange. That's why I had those note cards. That's why I've been declining invitations. I wasn't trying to pull away from you. I was trying to hide what was happening." The silence that followed felt eternal. Then Susan stood up, crossed the room, and hugged me. "You should have told us sooner," she said. "We could have helped." I was ashamed. Ashamed? Linda joined the embrace, then Patricia, then Beth, until I was surrounded by these women who I'd feared would pity me. "Margaret, we've been friends for over a decade. Did you really think a diagnosis would change how we feel about you?" "I didn't know," I admitted. "I was too scared to find out." They made me sit down, and we talked. Really talked. About fear and stigma and the stories we tell ourselves about aging and worth. Susan shared that her mother had had dementia. I hadn't known. Beth talked about her own fears as she watched herself forget names and misplace keys. Linda admitted she'd been worried about me for months but hadn't known how to bring it up. "So what do you need from us?" Patricia asked finally. "How can we help?" It was the same question Sarah had asked. The same question Robert had implied. And finally, I had an answer. "Help me stay connected. Help me stay engaged. Don't let me isolate myself again. And maybe be patient when I forget things. Remind me without making me feel broken." "Done," Linda said immediately. "And Margaret? You're staying in book club. We'll adapt however we need to. You're not losing us." I cried then, relieved tears that had been building for months. These women, my friends, they hadn't run. They'd stepped closer. The next Thursday, I went to the support group Robert had mentioned. Walked into the community center with my heart pounding, expecting to find a room full of sadness and loss. What I found instead was life. There were about 15 of us, people in various stages of cognitive decline, some with spouses or adult children, some alone. We sat in a circle, and the facilitator, a woman named Carol who had early-stage Alzheimer's herself, asked us to share our names and one thing we'd accomplished that week. When it was my turn, I said, "I'm Margaret. And this week, I stopped hiding." The room erupted in applause. Apparently, that was an accomplishment worth celebrating. I heard stories that night that mirrored my own. The shame. The fear. The elaborate coping mechanisms. But I also heard stories of courage. Of families coming together. Of people finding new ways to define themselves when old definitions no longer fit. A man named Walter, who'd been a surgeon before his diagnosis, talked about volunteering to teach medical students about patient communication. "I can't remember drug names anymore," he said. "But I can still teach them about empathy. I'm still useful, just in different ways." A woman named Dorothy described starting a blog about her journey. "Someone out there is going through this alone," she said. "If my story helps them feel less isolated, then this disease has given me a gift. A platform I wouldn't have had otherwise." Their resilience humbled me. These were people facing the same terrifying future I was facing, and they were choosing to face it with grace and creativity and community. After the meeting, Carol approached me. "The first time is always hard," she said. "But you came. That's the biggest step. How long have you been doing this?" I asked her. 3 years since diagnosis. I facilitate because it helps me. Keeps me engaged, gives me purpose. When you live with this, you have to be intentional about purpose. It doesn't just happen anymore. Her words struck me. Purpose doesn't just happen anymore. It has to be intentional. I thought about that all the way home. What was my purpose now? I couldn't be the sharp-minded professor anymore. Couldn't be the one everyone relied on for perfect recall. So who could I be? The answer came to me over the following weeks, slowly, in pieces. I could be honest. I could be vulnerable. I could be an example of facing fear instead of running from it. I could show Jake that dignity doesn't come from perfection, it comes from authenticity. I started small. I volunteered to speak at the library's health series about living with dementia. Terrifying? Absolutely. But also liberating. Standing in front of 50 people and saying, "I have Alzheimer's disease, and I'm going to tell you what that's actually like," felt like reclaiming power I'd given away to shame. I reconnected with old colleagues from the university. I told them the truth about why I'd been distant. Most responded with support. A few disappeared, their discomfort too great, and I let them go without guilt. Not everyone can handle difficult truths, and that's their limitation, not mine. I started attending Sarah's family dinners again, but with new ground rules. When I forgot something, we acknowledged it without drama. When I needed help, I asked for it. When Jake reminded me of his friend's name or the day of the week, I thanked him instead of pretending I'd known all along. Robert became a regular fixture in my life. We had coffee most mornings, and he'd share stories about Maria, the hard parts and the beautiful parts. He was teaching me something crucial, that love doesn't end when memory fails. That connection runs deeper than recognition. "You know what Maria taught me?" he said one morning. "That we're not our accomplishments. We're not our memories. We're the love we give and receive in each moment. That's what persists. That's what matters." 3 months after I stopped hiding, I started a journal. Not for memory, though it would serve that purpose too, but for legacy. Letters to my future self, I called it. In it, I wrote about who I was now, what I believed, what I wanted my daughter and grandson to know about me if the day came when I couldn't tell them myself. I wrote, "If you're reading this, I may not remember writing it. But know that right now, in this moment, I am at peace. I am loved. I am not ashamed. I have Alzheimer's disease, but I am still Margaret Chen. I am still someone who loves fiercely, who tries to be brave even when terrified, and who believes that vulnerability is strength, not weakness. Whatever you remember of me or don't remember, please remember this. Asking for help was the bravest thing I ever did." Sarah found me writing one day and asked what I was working on. "My story," I said, "so I don't forget who I was." "You mean who you are," she corrected gently. "No," I said. "I mean who I was. Because who I am is constantly changing. And that's okay. I'm learning that it's okay to be different versions of myself. To adapt. To let go of who I thought I had to be." She kissed my forehead. "I'm proud of you, Mom." Those words meant more than she could know. 6 months after that day at the bank, the day I forgot my own name, I found myself standing at another bank counter. Different bank, different teller, but the same potential for disaster. The young man asked me to confirm my full name for a transaction. And for a moment, just a brief, terrifying moment, it wasn't there. The information didn't come automatically. But this time, I didn't panic. I didn't pretend. I took a breath and said, "I'm having some trouble remembering right now. I have Alzheimer's disease. Can you help me?" He looked at me with kindness, not pity, just human kindness, and said, "Of course. Take your time." I looked at my driver's license. Margaret Elizabeth Chen. There it was, my name, the label I'd carried for 68 years. And seeing it written there, I realized something profound. The name wasn't the important part. The important part was that I was standing in a bank, conducting my business, living my life, and I'd asked for help when I needed it. The important part was that I hadn't let shame silence me. That evening, I was sitting on my patio when Jake ran over from next door, where he'd been playing with Robert's visiting grandson. "Grandma," he called out. "Can I tell you something cool?" "Always, sweetheart." He climbed into the chair next to mine, face glowing with excitement. "Mr. Robert told me about his wife. About how her brain got sick like yours. And he said even when she forgot things, she was still his favorite person in the whole world. He said, love is stronger than memory." "That's very wise," I said, my throat tight. "So I wanted you to know." Jake continued, his 8-year-old face very serious. "Even if you forget my name, or what grade I'm in or stuff like that, you're still my favorite grandma. You're still the person who teaches me things and makes me feel brave. That won't change." I pulled him close, this remarkable child who was teaching me about unconditional love. "Thank you, Jake. That means everything to me. Also," he added, pulling back to look at me, "I made you this." He handed me a small laminated card. On it, he'd written in careful block letters, "Your name is Margaret Chen. You are Jake's grandma. You are loved." I stared at that card, this gift from my grandson, and started to cry. But they were good tears. Healing tears. "I'm going to keep this in my wallet," I told him. "So even if I forget, I can remember the most important things." "That's what I thought," he said, satisfied. Then, with the resilience of childhood, "Can we have ice cream?" We went inside, and I scooped ice cream for both of us, and we sat at my kitchen table, the sticky notes, mostly gone now, replaced with simpler systems and the support of people who loved me, and talked about his day. This is what I've learned in the months since I stopped hiding. Dementia will take many things from me. My memory. My independence. Eventually, maybe even my ability to recognize the people I love. Those losses are real, and I won't pretend they don't terrify me. But here's what it can't take: the love that surrounds me. The connections I've built. The courage I've developed. The lessons I'm teaching my grandson are about facing hard things with honesty and grace. Robert was right. His wife was right. I am more than what I remember. I am what I give, what I receive, how I love, and how I let myself be loved. The day I forgot my own name was the day I learned that names are just labels. What matters is the life behind the label. The relationships. The impact. The moments of connection that persist even when details fade. I don't know what my future holds. Maybe I'll have 5 good years. Maybe 10. Maybe less. But whatever time I have, I'm going to spend it living authentically. Loving fully. Asking for help when I need it. Showing up for the people who show up for me. Because in the end, that's what dignity looks like. Not perfection. Not independence at all costs. Not hiding our struggles behind walls of shame. Dignity is saying, "I need help," and accepting it with grace. Dignity is letting people love you at your most vulnerable. Dignity is teaching the next generation that we're all worthy of support, regardless of our capabilities. Dignity is being brave enough to be human. They tell me that one day, maybe soon, maybe years from now, I might forget my name permanently. That day still terrifies me. I won't lie about that. But I'm no longer facing it alone. And that makes all the difference. Today, I remember what matters. I remember that I am Margaret Chen, retired professor, widow, mother, grandmother, and friend. I remember that I am loved, not despite my imperfections, but including them. I remember that asking for help was the bravest thing I've ever done. And on the days when I can't remember, there will be people there to remind me. People who see me clearly and love me fully. People who understand that we're all just walking each other home, helping each other remember the things that matter most. The day I forgot my own name was the day I learned that I am so much more than a name. So much more than a sharp mind or a perfect memory. I am love given and received. I am connected. I am courage in the face of fear. And that I'll hold on to as long as I can. And when I can't hold on anymore, I trust that the people around me will hold it for me. Because that's what we do. We help each other remember. We help each other carry the weight. We help each other find dignity in our shared humanity. That's not just my story. That's all of our stories, if we're brave enough to tell them. So here's my question for you, listening to this right now: what are you hiding? What truth are you keeping locked away because you're afraid of what people might think? What burden are you carrying alone because you've convinced yourself that asking for help would make you weak? I'm not saying you have to share everything with everyone. Privacy is different from shame. But if there's something in your life, a struggle, a diagnosis, a fear, a challenge, that's isolating you, that's making you pull away from the people who love you, I want you to consider this. What if sharing that truth doesn't diminish you? What if it actually connects you more deeply to the people around you? What if your vulnerability gives someone else permission to be vulnerable too? What if the thing you're most ashamed of becomes the bridge to your most meaningful relationships? I can't promise it will be easy. It wasn't for me. But I can promise you this. Living authentically, even when it's hard, is better than slowly disappearing while trying to maintain a facade that's exhausting you. You deserve support. You deserve connection. You deserve to be known and loved as you actually are, not as who you think you need to be. So here's what I want you to do. Right now, before this moment of clarity passes and fear takes over again, I want you to think of one person in your life who you trust. One person who's shown you they care. And I want you to tell them one true thing. One thing you've been hiding or minimizing or pretending isn't affecting you. You don't have to tell them everything. You don't have to be as dramatic as I was, confessing my diagnosis in one big reveal. Start small. I've been struggling with. I'm scared about. I need help with. Just one true thing. And then see what happens. See if that person runs or if they step closer. My guess? They'll step closer. Most people want to help. They're just waiting for permission. Waiting for you to let them in. Will you do that? Will you take that risk? Will you give yourself, and the people who love you, the gift of your authentic self? Because here's what I've learned. We don't have to wait until we're desperate. We don't have to wait until we've forgotten our own names. We can choose connection over isolation right now. Today. This moment. Your story doesn't have to be like mine. But whatever your story is, it deserves to be told. And you deserve to have people walk alongside you as you tell it. So tell me, and tell yourself, what's one truth you've been hiding? And who's one person you could share it with? The comments below are open. Your story matters. Your struggle matters. You matter. And you don't have to face any of it alone. Let's help each other remember what really counts. Let's help each other carry the weight. Let's help each other find dignity in our shared, imperfect, beautifully human lives. That's what families do. That's what communities do. That's what we do for each other. Now it's your turn. What's your story? And who will you tell? I'm listening. We're all listening. And we're here to remind you, you are more than what you remember. You are more than your struggles. You are loved, you are worthy, and you are not alone. Never, ever alone.